Cases of abductions went down by 28% across the country in the month of August, and that's according to a report, and as a result of the operations by security forces. A report analyzed by Daily Trust showed that a 49% increase in fatalities and an 18% increase in the number of incidents compared with the previous month of July. The report showed that 859 people were killed in the same period, with Borno State recording the highest number of 349 and Kaduna State coming second with 79 fatalities. Let's take a look at the report.
Military activities have stepped up to counter the activities of armed groups such as Boko Haram, ISWAP terrorists, IPOB terrorists, bandits, kidnappers and other criminals, which has had an impact on the activities of these groups. On the flip side, because of the increased engagement, there have also been reported cases of attacks on civilians and security forces by members of these illegally armed groups. The report noted that the month of August was dominated by a visible increase in operations of the security forces, with government claiming successes in the ongoing operations by security forces across the country. These operations included interdictions and clearance operations by the security forces in the Federal Capital Territory and the 6 geopolitical regions, as well as state-level measures by several regional and sub-national entities. Nevertheless, the rate of insecurity is still high, with 599 incidents recorded across the country, which resulted in 859 killings and 380 abductions, affecting 262 local government areas in 36 states. A breakdown of the incidents showed that 80% of the fatalities in August affected the northern part of Nigeria. We recorded 49% of the incidents, with the northeast recording the highest fatalities at 424. Also, 20% of the incidents occurred in the northwest political zone, with 169 fatalities. 11% were recorded in the north central, with 94 fatalities. Elsewhere, the southwest recorded 4% of the incidents, with 35 fatalities. 11% occurred in the southeast, with 98 fatalities, while the south-south recorded 5% of the incidents, with 39 fatalities. A closer look reveals that raids by non-state actors targeting rural communities were responsible for 314 of the fatalities. Combat Crossfire was responsible for 246 fatalities, while ambush resulted in 181 fatalities. Despite the current efforts of the security forces, there is still a need for government to do more to decrease the ability of non-state actors to challenge the supremacy of the use of force by the state. To this end, the federal, state, and local governments need to enhance collaboration for enhanced administration of criminal justice and the restoration of social order by addressing the root causes of these challenges. Some of these include weak state institutions, drug addiction, socio-economic grievances, poverty, unemployment, and effects of climate change, as well as the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. The report is also recommending collaboration between federal and state governments to dominate the forested and other ungoverned spaces, which the armed non-state actors use as bases for their operations.
All right, thank you so much for that report. Now we have a guest in the studio, Jonathan Onoja, security analyst, with us to talk about this situation. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Jonathan.
Support your duty, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have seen that this report released by Beacon Consulting, quite a lot of revelations from there. What are the indications for you going by this? We are seeing that there's a reduction in abductions, but again, an increase in fatalities. What does this indicate?
You see, the reduction in abduction have come from one level to another, and then I will have to give it to some security agencies that have put in their backs to ensure that they get rid of crime in Nigeria. Crime does not just occur. There are factors that lead to crime. And then there are also factors that facilitate crime easily. aside the conventional known factors that we know, hunger, poverty, lack of access to good educations and all of that that contributes to crime, there are also one of the major factors that leads to crime, which is drug abuse, drug and all of that. I want to start by giving it to the NDLEA chairman and the boss, Marua Buba. You see, the man have shown capacity to an extent that people can begin to look at him like a hero. And if we have Bubas in other agencies, then we'll begin to now do the internal glazing that is supposed to be, or as they were supposed to carry out the operations. Now, Mara have been able to an extent, reduce the case of drugs abuse in Nigeria, arresting barons, go to Lagos, go to all the states. He's doing his best.
So you think there's a correlation between this reduction in the abductions?
Yes, there is, because for them to carry out some of these operations, of course, they must prepare themselves with what they used to take to ensure that you cannot just carry your ordinary eyes, your conscience as you're seated, go to a neighboring village, get a pregnant woman, carry the child, or put the child from her stomach with your senses intact and your normal sense. You wouldn't want to do that. So there are certain things that instigate them in doing this.
But according to this report, anyways, the reduction in the abduction is mainly because of the military operations that have been ongoing in recent times, in the past few weeks.
We can't deny that part. We can't deny that. But I am trying to let you know that the effort is a collaborative effort, one point to another. If Mara have not done that, by ensuring that we get rid of those things that makes them to commit this crime.
But since you're harping a lot on the drug intake, then there's still a big problem, because the drugs that have been intercepted by NDLEA are the cocaine and all of that. The drugs that reports have found that a lot of people are taking now, they are not the cocaine.
Even the tramadols have been, I've seen.
Aside tramadol, there are some local drugs that people are taking now. Even, you know that, right?
I think the effort, we must give it to him, because that has actually reduced crime to an extent. Because it is the distribution of those drugs, that being cocaine, marijuana, tramadol, name them, that these guys take, that makes them to behave in to a certain extent. And also, we cannot take for granted the joint operation of our military for the past 3 months. We cannot take that for granted. They have been at the war front, and they are trying to show capacity that they can actually redeem the image of the Nigerian state. But then, if we don't have, like I used to say, the interagency rivalry has become a problem that is affecting the operation of the military, paramilitary, operating generally, affecting the operations of the security agency in Nigeria. If they begin to collaborate with each other from one point to another, I'm telling you, in the next few weeks, in the next few months, you begin to see some of them, coming out to even said, I have under this, the NSCDC is doing there in ensuring that there's no bunkering, there's no this and that. We'll have results.
So, the federal government, through the Minister of Information at the other time, Lai Mohammed, gave a target that by December, that the issues of terrorism, abduction will all be over and all of that. It looks like we are inching closer towards reaching that target.
No, if you see the crime rate, just like what you just show on your dashboard by Bitcoin, you discover that what the rate is now compared to what it has been. It's not something that we can give it from now to December and it's over. No, I can understand that it's a political season. Everybody wants to make certain statements to give credit to the government, but that is not to say that we are not equally encouraging these things to come to an end. In my own opinion, if we truly want to get out of this, government must be decisive. Government, outside the military operations, government itself must ensure that if there's need for them, because we cannot do this with the military alone. Government policies, government also must be involved to ensure that, okay, now that our military is doing this, what do we do to support them? Because the military, sometimes we just go arrest, then the police and other persons to prosecute. The judicial system also has no independence of its own to do certain things. when it is time for them to prosecute, you begin to see certain things coming up and all of that.
There's something I'd like to know though. What changed? Because, all these things have been happening for a long time. And despite all the directives by the president, end this, end that, we didn't see an end. So what changed in these past few months?
Mr. President, unfortunately, would have ended like one of the worst presidents we've ever had, if not for so far that they are trying to indemnify the image. You see, people are beginning to wonder if you can do this in the past 7 months. Why don't you start early? Why is it now? But like I said the other day, it's like the last straw of a drowning man, ensuring that he can get hold of anything before he gives up. So Mr. President has been on them to ensure that at least his administration end a success. So he is not looking at, he has provided, and like I said, this government provided everything for our military. I must give it to them that this government provided enough for our security agencies to have performed the magic or performed everything.
Okay.
But unfortunately, they failed. So he's saying that either you perform or you return my money.
Okay, Onoja, the figures that were released by this report is indicating that Borno State has the highest number of fatalities in the past few, in the month of August. And we somehow, there's a belief that issues of security in the Northeast, particularly in Borno State, has been dealt with to a large extent. But we are seeing this staggering number. What would have informed this high number of fatalities?
You see, if you look at it, Borno State, Zamfara State, these are states that have suffered a whole lot in the past few months. In fact, since the inception of this insurgency and all of that, they have been at the center of it. Now, you don't expect such area to be listed below certain rate, because it will become very obvious. You're just trying to promote a number or promote a figure that does not exist. The state is trying so hard to get rid of them, and you see again, even of recent, the discussions of how some leaders of these terrorist group, are trying to even come to the community, surrender and negotiate, is another aspect. Why some are still dead in the forest, in the thick forest, they have not come out fully to say we want to surrender, and negotiation is ongoing. So the reduction you have seen in the numbers is because of some of those that have come out and said we don't want to continue in this anymore. We're ready to cooperate with the government, and then let us work together. Some are still there. So, and they have been at the forefront of the whole thing of insecurity. So we don't expect them to have said the numbers now is 0.0 in Borno State. The percent of this is 0.0. We don't have insecurity. We don't have anything terrorist in this.
But I'm just wondering that why should Borno be having the highest number of fatalities when we have states like Zamfara, Katsina, where we've heard of, abductions over and over?
Well, it's because, sometimes this can be taken, this kind of research goes by numbers of incidences, not by the abduction per se. The incidents of terrorism, banditry around that area or in those zones are more compared to any other. It could be that is even the domicile branch of all the leaders, the network that they operate. It could equally be that the numbers of operations that they have taken in Borno, or the kind of information that they may have gathered about Borno, is more than that of the Zamfara, it's more than that of the Kaduna, it's more than that of any other state. And that as well, based on what they even get from the citizens, the indigents, because the natives will give them details of what is happening more than what we see on the social media. There are so many things that happen that is not even on the news. So then the natives will say, this is what has happened in the past, and this is how it is happening. And they can only go to Zamfara and say, how is it happening? Zamfara can become a showcase because of what? We have a governor who actually wanted to fight it out and want to look at what Zamfara state government is doing. So they have a governor who is determined to fight it out. So anything that he does, you always see it on air. But in that of Borno State, you can discover that even the Zulum is doing so much. But then the level of publicity that is ongoing in Zamfara is not even that much in Borno, because the Borno governor is just a figure that has sold himself out to the public because of his goodwill for the people. So if we go by why should this number be this and why should this number not be that, you will be wrong, because you have not gone to the natives to discuss with the native one-on-one to hear first-hand information of exactly how these things are happening.
Okay. All right. We also understand that as a result of the dislodgement of these terrorists in different communities, there have been increase in the number of attacks on commuters, rural communities, and all that. And then we also understand that there's a convergence, or I would say regrouping, of the terrorists in other parts of the country, you know, aside the Northwest, for instance. We have in the borders around Niger, Kwara, Oyo State, we understand that they are now regrouping in those areas. And as a result of this dislodgement, more attacks on commuters, more attacks on rural communities. So how can we curtail the ability for these terrorists to actually move around? Because they are able to move around. That's why they are doing what they are doing. So in terms of frustrating their movement, what are we doing in that regard?
That is why government must first accept with the state governors. The federal government must accept with the state governors to empower the state security architecture, that some of the regional architectures like the Motekun, what the Benue state governor is doing, and other states that have come out, even including Kaduna State, that have come up with the idea of regional security policing. So if they empower such people with arms, you know, I think it will begin to now complement the conventional security agencies by way of identifying, you know, responding to emergencies around those areas. And I want to believe that if they are able to, you know, empower those guys, then it is easier for us to now trace where they are now and what we can do now, because information will be coming. So it is, for me, a way forward. The way forward now is to see how we can begin to integrate those that we call regional security, like the vigilantes that they used to call, integrate them into the conventional security architectures, and then they can now have direct link discussions with our conventional security architecture. By so doing, in the intelligence gathering, information, and all of that will be reaching them on time for response.
Are you saying that the federal government should accept that the time for state police has indeed come?
Well,
so that it can set in place modalities to make it work?
I don't even see, well, at this point, state police is of importance. But I'm even looking at the community policing more than even the state policing. Because when we look at state policing and the community policing, the concept for these two have some kind of difference that you can begin to see that even the community policing is of much important. Take for instance the case of Kaduna State. The case of Kaduna State, when some persons, some terrorists were going into some forest, it was the community that said, look, we saw some persons in their large numbers going into a particular forest. They came with motorcycles and this and that. That is a community policing force. So if they collaborate with the community there, and then the community now report to the nearest police station, the nearest police station can equally ask for backup. You understand? So they should not, but if they now have the vigilantes, the state regional security on ground doing that, and even the private security companies there, if they can even license and empower the private security companies working in some of those states and said, come, see, because of the numbers of personnel we don't have, we can begin to collaborate with some of you to give us first-hand information and empower them. That is a way to go. Because if you go by state policing, the fear of some governors using those powers is a problem.
But if you talk about state policing, will state police be armed? Will they be, aside providing information, what else would they do? Because we've found ourselves in situations where communities provide information for the conventional security forces, and then the necessary action is not taken because maybe they are overstretched, or maybe the logistical issues and the rest of them. So when we talk about community policing, what will be the modality, or what the structure for the community policing? Will they be armed? Will they have vehicles? Will they have equipment so that they can act on their own without necessarily going or waiting for the conventional police?
For the federal government to consent to the idea of the regional security to bear arms so that they can respond to emergencies. If they are not bearing arms, then the essence of their establishment has been defeated.
But instead of them consenting to regional police units to bear arms, or isn't it better that they come up with a modality that will now be the same for every state in the form of a state police, instead of, because you saw the fought and back between the federal government and the governor of Ondo State not too long ago, in fact just last week.
And even also the Benue State government, with the case of not accepting the federal government stance for the regional security not to bear arms. You see, we are already replicating it. Look at the Amotekun. Look at what they call the Eastern Security Network. And also, most of the North, even the Kaduna State has their own now, and the Benue State has their own too now. Other states are now replicating this in different places, and they say this is the best for us. Why is this so? The government is afraid that when you say state policing, the commissioners of those states become like their luga. They become the inspector general. They can do and undo. And you see, we have a federal system.
But don't you think that there are concerns about the unconventional nature of some of these arrangements that we are making? And for us to deal with some of the unconventional issues or controversies, isn't it just better for us to formalize it and put it in form of a state police?
There are modalities for, I know very well for that of the...
I mean, for instance, Ebubeagu now, for instance, in the southeast, there's a whole lot of controversy.
The funding is a major problem, the number one. The number two, those who give these arms, there must be a process before, you recruit, give somebody arms to come and begin to use, because the kind of people we have these days, someone can become, just use that as a cover, use the arms, and then begin to do evil. But even at that, are we not seeing those that we call the Confederate Security Agency that have seen some of their personnel are still using the arms for evil things? So I think for me, the fear of the federal government is that the state actors we hijack this and begin to use it for other means.
But no state governor is going to be there more than 8 years though. No governor is going to be in office in perpetuity.
That is the problems, that the reality we have not come to terms with. So if that is a problem, we have a long-term plan and we have a short-term plan. If this short-term plan can serve us for the meantime, while we are doing our internal cleansing, to ensure that we have a bandit-free Nigeria, to have a terrorism-free Nigeria, then we should do that for now. We cannot say, okay, you go to a particular place, while coming here, you see your security personnel there. They need to be armed. For emergency, they have to respond. I know you have your armed personnel taking their cover. But then, for an emergency, you need those personnel to be armed so that they can respond. So if we have them and they know that these people are here, they are armed, it is because we are not having anybody to combat with these guys. That's why they're taking over the rural community and then using that as a cover. But if you know that the regional guys are on their toes and they bear arms too, to match up with anything that they're going to do, they equally take over. Why didn't they come to Abuja to come and hide that?
All right, talking about ungoverned spaces, as the security forces intensify their offensive and all of that, these people are moving from one part to the other. Some experts have said that it is time for the federal government to collaborate with state governments to take over these ungoverned spaces, the forest and all of that. To what extent do you think that will help?
When we talk about forest and all of that, how large is those forests? We keep talking about forest, and then, look, the truth of the matter is that it is not just about the forest, it's about the will. We have the Sambisa forest for years. What have stopped if we said, oh, the excuse is that people are living around the neighborhood in a forest, people are not living there. What stopped us from us now to turn that forest to a tourist zone? Why not we enter the forest, clear those forests, and have it like a tourist zone, and have our guys, our security person manning that place? How many forests are we talking about? Some of these people are not living in the forest. They are in the houses under a full air conditioned. They are not living in that forest. It's just a cover to give excuses where they stay. If they are in those forests, go into the forest, bring them out, and then let's prosecute them. Why is it taking so long? How many people are there arrested from the forest?
Okay, recently, just earlier on, we've heard updates on flood situations in Adamawa, in Kogi State. So obviously the consequences of climate change is upon us as a country. Do you think that this poses some kind of security threat for us?
Of course, that's a security threat, a big one at that. For instance, that of the Kogi State. I see that we are taking certain things for granted, and we are not responding to emergency. We are not proactive. Why am I saying this? For such, for such a calamity that have before a state like that, I expect by now we should have all emergency bosses, all emergency authorities, even the federal government, to have intervened and see a possible way of doing this, of ending this. But then we may not be able to respond now, not until our family or their own family is involved directly. Then they can begin to respond to some of those things. Now, I can understand that, yes, to an extent, it's the effect of climate change or not. But another thing again is that I think it is our negligence to having an understanding, because it's not just about climate change. No, it is our negligence to putting certain things in order. Why will I say so? If you have water in your studio here, and then you have a need for you to have a drainage, you said, no, you don't need to have a drainage. Let us be managing it. When the cleaners come, they clean, and then they use to mop. At the end of the day, the time a rain will come, there's a day rain will come, and the cleaner will not be able to manage it as she or he has been managing it before. If you go to Kogi State now, you see some families, they are stranded. Where do you expect them to go now? That is another aspect of insecurity. Because when the people are internally displaced, they look for another opportunity to live. People will lose properties, people will lose life, people will lose a lot of things. So you understand with me that it's another threat it's a threat on our national security. Because those people there, when they are homeless, they begin to look for where to go. And then when they look for any opportunity, when they get any opportunity, some persons are not even intentional, they don't have an intention to commit crime. But because of the situation they find themselves, it becomes another problem. And then let me draw your attention again to another situation in Benue State, around the Enugu, Abuja, Makodi road there, something at the federal road there. This is a roadside, a construction site that they have actually awarded to some persons, some contractors years back, and they abandoned this project. Now this project is creating a problem. The commuters, travelers are they're suffering. Then how do you begin to now blame it on climate change when there are when people that are supposed to carry out certain things did not do it as and when due?
All right, this current action by the military that has led to this reduction, do you think it can be sustained?
I am 100% sure that they can sustain it, and I believe in the leadership of the current military. I believe in the current leadership of the military. We have the current defense minister in the theater, and he understands what the theater. He was one that led Operation Dole, Lafia Dole, and all of that. At the war front, he was there. So I was surprised even that his emergence is not even giving me the force, the momentum I expected him, but I can understand that he's gaining ground. He's trying to strategize to understand the template of what is happening there now. And then if you see what he's doing now, he's trying to do what he call internal cleansing. And that internal cleansing should not even be done by him. I think it should be done by the police to ensure that there's a synergy between the two forces.
All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan Onoja, security analyst, for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives. We appreciate it.
Thank you.